everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Lunch Money with Scott and Edan. I am Scott Schnaars, and I am joined with Edan Gottlib. And today we're going to talk about something really provocative, and that is sales compensation. It's something that is probably near and dear to everybody who is watching this heart. And we want to get into the whole discussion about compensation. I'm going to open up with a really provocative question, and that is, why do SaaS salespeople willingly risk 50% of their income in commissions, and should they even have to? So today we're going to talk about the sales compensation. We're going to talk about its role in driving the behavior and the motivation that we want, and we're going to talk about what is a comp plan really designed to do. So maybe I'll kick that first question over to Edan. And when you think about compensation and you think about how you've structured comp plans for your team, what are the kinds of behaviors that you're looking to drive, and how do you get a compensation plan that aligns to the team and company goals, but is still fair to the sellers?
Oh, yeah, you had a lot of good questions there, especially the first one. I can't wait to get to that one
Right
about
out of the gate.
why we're risking half of our income for performing over everything else. Um,
Which is great. I mean, obviously we'll talk about that later on, but nobody else in the company risks 50% of their income for their performance. Why should salespeople?
it's a fair point. It is, and it's the right point. It's like this is the only role in the company that truly puts half their income on the line for the overall performance, and everything else has to work out. Right, the product has to be good, the go to market, the segmentations, the product marketing, the materials. Everything has kind of not even the CEO takes that, but we'll talk about that
Yeah.
later. To your specific questions about comp plans, I think the most important thing about comp plans is that they have to be aligned or structured in such that you deliver the results the company needs in order to progress and move forward to whatever they need to do. And it's not always just revenue. Revenue is part of it, but it depends on the stage and the size and what you're trying to achieve. Sometimes it's the number of customers, sometimes it's the quality of customers. And I think we'll talk in a minute about what the structure is. And I think that structure needs to present this or represent it, but it needs to be aligned to what would be great. If it is at the end of the year, we got these 3 or 4 or 5 things as a company achieved, then wow, that's amazing. And we could do the next round, or we can get profitable, or we could, become a Cloud 100, or whatever we want to achieve are these components. And the other thing I'll say, there's more than one thing. It's usually 2 to 3 things that you want to be achieving versus just the revenue number.
And
If
how do
you
you come up
just
with
focus,
those two
good.
to three things, right? Because you're right. Because maybe I want more logos than I need revenue, or maybe I need higher profit margins than I need deals. There's always that balance in there. Does that need to come from the CEO? Does that come from the head of sales? Where does those trade-offs come from?
Yeah, it needs to come from the CEO or the company's management team that needs to agree when they pivot for the year. What is success looking like at the end of the year? We and a couple of companies that I worked for, we had these big events that really helped you focus on what needs to be achieved. Things like I want to do a round of funding, or I want to do a secondary. And you kind of created a very clear sheet that says, okay, if I'm going to hit, $100 million and that many customers and that profit or that margins or those or that acquisition or those kind of partnerships, if I could define, and there's usually probably 3 to 5 items on this list, if I get that, then I'm going to get that multiple. I'm going to get that evaluation. I'm going to get, that thing going on. And so really the owner's thing is on the management team led by the CEO, but it's the management team to come up with, this will be great if your ends up like this. And then sales, I keep on repeating to everybody, sales and the whole go-to-market team is an execution team. So then we could take it and execute against it. And the comp plan should be structured to say, hey, when we achieve these goals, we talked about it, you get the other half of your paycheck, but more so, it's like you can even make more of it if we overachieve these goals.
Yeah.
But it
Now,
has to be
now,
that. And the failure points that happens there, if that you don't have this alignment, you say, oh, just, $1 million per rep and half of the salary, do the math, and you're good. You get a comp plan.
yeah, here's 10% on every dollar that you close, and
Yeah.
go rock and roll. Um, Now, and it's easy to come up with you've got $1 million quota, we're going to give you 10 or 12% or whatever the number is there, and rock and roll with it. You know, when you talk about going to all of these different departments and aligning your 3 to 5 things that you want to get, that does take a long time. And you and I have both come from companies where, we would get our comp plan in April for a January, fiscal year start. If we're lucky, we're getting it in April, right? How do
Yeah.
you think about the trade-offs between quickly getting a comp plan out the door, which is the most fair thing to the sales team, versus like over engineering this thing and delivering it in April, May, June, August, maybe. Like, and you companies are going to run into that risk of analysis paralysis a little bit the more that they take their time and iterate on it, which ultimately is really unfair to the salespeople. Like they're out there trying to sell, but they don't know like if they're doing a good job or not because it's not aligned to their compensation. Going back to the risk of having 50% of my income tied to compensation, if I don't even know what the hell I'm supposed to be selling out of the gate to begin with, how do you balance that?
You had to call me out on the August thing. But
I'm going to assume that one wasn't your fault.
but it's a good point. It creates there was this I would call it false sense that it's a trade-off. Either I get it out fast or I get it out really sophisticated. The real problem is alignment beforehand. Creating a comp plan is a fairly straightforward, easy exercise. It can take a few days, it can, a week or two. With ChatGPT, you can make it even faster because it does all the calculations for you. The problems that you get into are twofold. A, misalignment between the finance group and yourself or the CEO or go to market or whatever strategy, whoever the group in the consideration of the company is. So when it comes to this is the first time it hits dollars and it translates to money. So then people become very, oh no, I don't want to pay for this. I don't want to pay for it. So you get one is misalignment. The other one is, you know, you get stuck on the little things that really don't matter. And from a financial standpoint, you need to approach it and say, okay, there's going to be a 5-8% kind of margin of error. Don't focus on these little things. It doesn't matter if you'll make that or other mistake. It's fine. But it's more important for you to make sure that it is well thought out and kind of organized to meet the targets that I want. And then you could get it out fast. The reasons whenever I got into trouble releasing comp plans, it would be that we get second, third, fourth guessed because it's again, it's finally money. Like, oh, I don't want to pay people for stuff they didn't do. It's fine. It's okay even if you make some mistakes and you pay a little bit extra for the to your point. It's not just the fairness to the salespeople. It's the company is supposed to design the focus of their behavior and their actions. If you're going to lose a quarter, you lost a quarter of something you wanted to achieve, and you didn't incentivize
Yeah,
or guide them to do it. That's the bigger loss.
yeah, and
So it's really
that's a
goes
real
back
hit.
alignment from the get go. Don't get stuck on the little things, and if you've made mistakes, that's fine.
So as an action item, if I'm a sales leader, I probably should be talking to my CFO and CEO about what compensation looks like at least 3 months before the fiscal year begins, right? So that I'm getting what are the parameters that we want to drive? What are the goals that we have? What are the types of deals that we want to do? Having all of that well defined way before the fiscal year starts, so that we can go execute on this. Now it's hard. It's hard to get their attention because you're trying to do that at the end of the year, and thinking about future compensation during a close of a year is always a tricky one. But I do find it's so important to be thinking about compensation for the future year at least 3 months in advance. Don't you agree with that?
Yeah, but I think there's a problem. There's a
Late
problem.
on
So
me.
the problem is they don't know. Right? A lot of
Hmm.
companies don't really think, and as much as they talk about it, they they
That's
live,
fair.
month to month or quarter to quarter, so they don't really know. But your suggestion is the right one. You want to be engaged with finance and with the CEO and with the leadership ahead of time, and you can construct what the comp plan is going to look like and how it's going to get constructed based on the pieces you decide and allow them to make a decision of okay, what will be the number for the AR, what will be the number of customers, or whatever the things that they kind of know what will be important. They just can't tell you the numbers for it, but you can have it all kind of organized or signed up from the get go. That makes
So
sense.
when I was, yeah, no, absolutely it does. I think it's good feedback. When I was coming up in my career, I had a mentor and good friend of mine still. He used to talk about red light comp plans. And what he meant by a red light comp plan was that he wanted his reps to be able to be sitting at a red light and be able to calculate in their head exactly how much money they were going to make that month, that quarter, that year, whatever the time frame might be. When we think about great comp plans come with a lot of different variables in them. You've got your base salary, of course, you've got your commission, you've got bonuses, you've got SPIFs, you've got accelerators. Um, as we think about what a great comp plan looks like, and we're at the beginning of the year now and rolling out a great comp plan, like How do you think about compensation when you're designing a plan? Like, what does a great comp plan look like to you?
So there's five components to a comp plan, right? You got your base salary, you got your commissions, you got your accelerators, you got SPIFs, and then you got equity.
Yeah,
And so those are the pieces you have to play with. The common thing you see is the 50-50 split between commission and base. Right? So that's the first kind of order of business. So you'll sometimes see 55-45, 60-40-ish kind of thing, but that's really the common kind of practice that you would see. Now comes the interesting part, which is the commission based. And the commission based, you can pick one or two models, right? The flat model and the accelerated model, right? Flat model says you're going to get 8%, and maybe after you hit 100%, I'll give you 10% or something like that. If you got the accelerator one, you can say, okay, for the first 50% of the revenue, you're going to get 5%, then we're going to give you 7, and then I'm going to give you 10 once you hit your quota. So those kind of on the high level, the options that you get to play with. Now, there are more dimensions that are important to you that you want to put in the comp plan. And to your question about, we want it simple, I want to do it on the red light kind of thing. The more sophisticated and the bigger your organization becomes, not just size, but in terms of what you sell as well, the more you want to have a more sophisticated comp plan because there's nuances and there's more things that
yeah,
you want to achieve and there's different combinations. So we talked about what do we want to have at the end of the year will be success. You might have three scenarios that all of them are good, but they're different configurations. It's not a one thing. It's never just a one thing that will happen. Not like, oh, if we hit $100 million, it's great. Great. But if we hit $100 million and 50% of our customers churned, that's not a good outcome. So you have to be more sophisticated with that one. And you really go for, there's a few components to play with. Multi-year deals, right? Do I want to have customer satisfactions kind of numbers, churns, or things like that? Do I want to have any team kind of collaboration work? And do I want to have number of customers or types of customers as part of my like? So those are the combinations, and you can choose. I talked about the five components earlier. Do I put them in my commission structure or do I want to put them as a spiff? And the way you distinction where you put them is based on is it something that is important for the year or is it something that I want to run as a temporary quarterly, monthly kind of basis of an adjustments? Because, oh, if we only had, five more customers this quarter, then we hit this 10%, month over month growth, then it's a spiff. But if I know that I would like most of my deals to be 3-year deals because it takes me more time, because whatever it is, then it's a year long. This is how you pick commissions or
yeah.
spiffs. Now, again, those nuances are important. If I want to get 100 million, or I want to get 50 million, I want to get 30 million, I want to get 110% NRR, and you want to put this so people will do it. Now, here's the thing about simplicity versus complexity. The greatest salespeople love the complexity of a sales comp plan because, again, and CFOs are going to hate me for this one, because they could really maximize their money. And
Exactly.
it's not gaming the system. It's doing what the system wanted for it. Um, and it's funny because you sometimes you put it in when you plan it, and then when you have to pay for it, you get a lot of resistance. Oh, why am I paying for this extra stuff? Like, oh, you just signed for 3 years. They didn't change anything on the deal. Yeah, but 3 years was important to you, right? You saw that after 18 months they hit value point, and then they never churned. So you need that time. So those are really important things to play with. So when you're really starting off, and maybe when you're a founder seller getting a few A's, go simple. As soon as
Yeah.
you get a little bit more sophisticated, do the work. It is much more valuable.
And if you can find a CEO or a CFO that likes writing big commission checks, even better for you.
Found out that they always liked it at the beginning of the discussion. They less liked it when they actually had to pay for it.
When the check clears, they don't like it so much.
Yes.
So you hit on something really interesting, and that is about the 50%, right? You've got this risk and reward model that, for some reason we all signed up for at the beginning of our careers, 100 years ago. But we have like this 50% of our income is commission based. Whether you're, a sales rep, if you're an SDR, maybe you've got 30% of your salary as commission based, but if you're a seller, you've got 50%. If you're a sales leader, you've got 50%. If you're a VP, you've got 50%. Like, it seems like a big risk reward. So let's talk a little bit about the rationale behind that structure and the risk that salespeople and sales leaders have to accept there. Because like it seems like it's an industry norm in SaaS. I don't get the impression that it's an industry norm in literally any other industry in the world. And maybe I'm wildly off by that.
I don't think you're wildly off, but there are different industries and there's different configurations, right? So, for instance, if you look at the real estate environment, it's actually worse, right? They usually hire you with like even no base,
Yeah.
and so there's different
I'll be controversial though
salespeople.
and question if that's really selling versus
Yes,
selling.
there's a whole discussion, right? And so I think the configuration of 50-50 came about as far as we're going to give you, we're going to make an investment in you, but in return, you still kind of have an uncapped world, but you're going to have to perform in order to get paid. And it's an interesting general, if we go, kind of more philosophical discussion about the concept of do I pay people for just their time or do I pay for the performance? And I think a lot of salespeople have a lot of entrepreneur spirit in them, and entrepreneurs usually are like business ownership and things like that. So they come in and so the model relates to them in terms of like, oh, I will have unlimited ability to control my income, but I will do it in a safer environment. And so I think that's the notion. Um, the question of like, is the 50-50, how do you make it a fair model so you don't starve people? Because the 50-50 not just goes for salespeople, sometimes it goes into the SDR worlds and into some other kind of functions in the company. And you got to make sure it's fairly balanced in terms of don't starve people, don't make them not being able to pay their rent. But on the other hand, you got the model of pay for performance. You actually have to be able to deliver in order to get your full potential of what the earning is in this position.
Yeah.
Well, and everybody in sales, I think it also appeals to our nature of competitiveness and we like the action. I don't want to call it take advantage because it's not in a negative way that you do it. It's just a good fit of you're wired that way, willing to take that risk.
And we love that lottery ticket too. Like we all know like the sales guy. Like I'll be the first to admit. Like when I first joined the Yahoo ad sales team, my boss called me into his office, sat me down. He's like, "Hey, I got some good news for you. We just a deal with such and such just came in, and you're going to get a $45,000 commission check." And I kind of like looked around, like me, like, is that like I'm getting that? And he's like, "Yeah, like sometimes like shit just happens." Right. And that would have been, that was obviously a lot better that month than a 50-50 split. It's like those things do happen. So we love that lottery ticket that sometimes falls in our pocket. And we also love, like, I think every good salesperson out there likes to be a big game hunter. Whether if your average deal size is $10,000 a year, like the good sellers are going to try and get it to 20. If your average deal size is 100,000 a year, good sellers are going to try and get it to a million. If your average sales is a million, the good guys are going to try and get it to 10 or plus. Right? So we all want that lottery win that comes with like a huge commission check, right? Like, and as a sales leader, like I love nothing more than writing like $1 million plus commission check to my sellers.
But I absolutely agree. But I think the configuration though has some nuances. This is going back to the complet and using a more sophisticated model versus the simplified one. Because you could be a big game hunter by saying, hey, our deals are all, I don't know, 5K or 10K, but I'm going
Yeah.
to go get 100 of them. And so that's my big game play. I think the other one that is slightly feeling better than lottery is the fact that you can do and you can take action to improve your odds.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, lottery is
And
very much
and
of a
you can,
metaphor.
yeah, and you can do it also in a team effort. And it goes back to I want to talk again on the components of the complaint and how you structure them, right? So we talked about commission, we talked about base, but you could talk about the team aspect of it. It's like, do I do it per an individual rep, or do I do it per pod structure when I put in the SC there and the SDR and BDR or whatever combination of a partner guide? You have a lot of different ways to play around with it to construct something so that to what we just talked about, that the motivation and that knowing of like everything is possible kind of mindset that you have that kind of a team in place to do is directed to put their efforts and energy towards the things that would yield what the company really wants and do it in a profitable way.
Yeah.
um, and that is part of the magic, I think, of this. To your point of lottery, it's like people win the lottery, but it's a passive thing that people coming to go to markets and sales are want to take charge and improve their odds into doing it. And your comp plan is this directive into like this is what is where I want you to go make it happen, so you'll be successful. Um, yeah, we didn't talk about there's the nuances about in commission payments or in commissions in general about um, do I want to make it an accelerator plan or do I want to make it a flat plan or like what are the choices or decisions points around mm, when you structure it? What are the preference
Are you
what
talking about the
if you
timing
had any?
of when the seller's getting paid, or?
No, I'm talking about the, flat. Do I do flat or do I do, tiered? For instance, on the commission payment. Do I do per team, like the team shares it, or do I do individual?
Yeah.
It's like, and so you got all these different kind of nuances. And I wonder if you had thoughts about if you have a preference, because again, it depends on.
You introduced me to like this idea of like from 0 to 50% you get paid a smaller percentage, from 50 to 100 you get slightly larger, and then accelerators. Like I like the accelerator model. I felt like the kind of having that mid-tier layer in there sort of overcomplicated a little bit. But I understand the philosophy of it too. Like we don't want to overpay underperformers either, right? So like if you are a good seller, you should be able to get to that 50% mark a lot faster than a bad seller who might finish the year at 48, 50, 52%. Like why are we paying them? Why are we overpaying them at a higher percentage there? So I get the philosophy on that. For accelerators, like I think it should go, when you get to 200%, 300% of your number, like I think accelerators should go crazy. And that's real money for the company and it's real money for the seller. And in a lot of cases, like I think it can be life changing money for the seller. Like I've seen a lot of sellers make kind of deep 7-figure commission checks, and like I said, those are always fun to pay out, but they're fun to pay out because they have such a meaningful impact on the company too.
Yeah.
Um,
And by the way, the reason I brought it up because I think there's two parts to it. One is the financial part of like how do I budget for the the commission payments
yeah,
for even for the flat and the stuff. In a general, just a thumbnail thing, you should think about cost of sale is anywhere between 20 to 30 to 35. Kind of that's where the budget's coming from and how you pay
hmm
for it. I think the tiering later is important based on really what is your situation, right? If you have a situation where you're trying to drive a high performance team, then your point, this is kind of why we rolled it out and we did it, is that, if you can't hit the 50% mark, you're not high performance. So it wasn't just about I want to save the money. It was more about I'm trying to make a statement towards this is
right,
this is how we measure your success kind of thing. Um,
yeah,
and so you want to separate the two because sometimes you would say, hey, I don't want to your earlier point, I don't want to pay too much on smaller revenue or people that hit. That's a different choice than ones that I'm trying to drive a certain behavior or I'm trying to and people fall into this trap and VP of sales falling in the trap. And this is where the discussion with finance is important. It's like, let's define what the budget is for our commissions, and then let me decide how I want to distribute it based on what I'm trying to achieve with the team. If it's an early stage team that I just want to get customers, I probably wouldn't do the tiering because I just want customers. I don't want them to get
yeah.
focused on.
Well, and I remember at WebEx, so I was the third salesperson hired at WebEx, but I mean we hired 20 right behind me very quickly. We had a couple of quarters where we just wanted to get logos. Like we just felt like it was a land grab, and we just said any deal that you get, we're going to pay a flat fee. And I kind of remember it being about $2,000, and we said as long as the deal's over $2,000, like you're getting $2,000, and like we just paid that. And that one quarter, I remember doing like 23 transactions. Like we were just cranking them out for that, on that comp plan because it was a really good comp plan and it drove the behavior that you want. You can imagine if there's 20 salespeople out there and they're all getting 20 deals done, like that was a hell of a land grab move by our CFO and CEO at the time, who really helped us to drive a lot of revenue, but more importantly, drive a lot of customers and take customers away from clients. I also do like the paying people well on competitive takeaways. Like I think like that's such a good model to put in place. Like anytime you can do a competitive takeaway, you should pay a little bit of a bonus on that. And if it's
Again,
a
this falls
logo
into
takeaway,
yep.
that's even better.
Yep. And this goes into if it's a temporary one, I'll put on the SPIF. If it's a permanent one, I'll put on the commissions. And it's important to me
Yeah,
because I'm trying to get market share. One of the companies I work for, we had about 56% market share. So the competitive takeaway wasn't interesting to me for the commission
Right.
standpoint. Right. I did want to, own the top 100 customers. So those logos were worth it for me. Again, to exactly a great example of like you want to adjust to what is important for the company at the end of it. I'll give one more tip. I think that I've used a lot in terms of the paying, and you mentioned paying a lot of money for either the SPIFs or the great salespeople. That later on it's like, why they made $1 million? He's a salesperson. What is it? Things like that. Talk about money, life changing money. The the exercise that I have to unfortunately use many, many times is at the end of the problem when he gets to that. Um, and sometimes I do it actually when we structure the comp plan as well. We want to put some commissions or some spiffs around like more logos or high quality or certain customers' names or logos. I would go if this was the last month of December and the last week, sorry, the last week of December. And I would bring you these, three major, I will bring Nike and Adidas and stuff coming into you. Would you pay me that? You're like, of course. Good. Then it should be in the plan. And
Yeah.
taking it away from the payment into here is the situation. Would it be valuable for you if we do this? Helps you put it in the first place.
Oh,
Um,
great idea on how to like sell this internally. I love that.
and I had to use it so many times, structuring at the beginning of the year, when everybody's like, "Oh, why are we going to pay extra for 3-year deals?" Like, well, if
Yeah.
I'm going to stand in and your churn, these four guys are going to churn on you. It's going to hurt your growth targets. How much would you pay? Would you pay $10,000 for it? Oh, I will. Good. That's what's in the plan. So use that mechanism both at the
Great
construct
action
and at
item.
the payment.
Um, how do you feel about commission timing? Like I've always been of the opinion that like, look, like your sales team is not a collections agency. Your sales team is not an implementation team. Your sales team goes out and closes deals and gets signed contracts and gets a commitment on payment. So I'm always of the opinion that deals should get paid, when the contract gets signed or net 30 after the contract gets signed or some kind of like, good timing on that. But I know a lot of companies feel like, hey, like we're not going to pay the seller until we get paid. We're not going to pay the seller until the client goes live, or they start mixing it up. Like I've done one where it's, we'll give you 30% when the thing signs. We'll give you 30% when we get paid, and we'll give you 30% when they go live, or kind of however you get to 100% there. Like, how do you feel about like the timing on commissions? And even then that gets into clawbacks too.
So we'll start with timing. I think timing goes, hey, if you have a problem, you need to compensate with timing. Otherwise, you pay when they close the deals or 30 days after. If you're cash strapped, then only pay when you get paid because you're cash strapped, right? If you have a problem with customers going live, then put that into provision of when you pay things or break it out into or give an extra commission when they go live. And so, but if you don't have that problem, or if that problem is small, so many times, and we've been into this situation where you had one or two cases out of 100, and because of that, you try to change the comp plan or add things to that and do callbacks, and you really completely lost the focus of what the comp plan should be doing for you because of these extreme cases that happen. Um, the 80/20 rule, if it's 80% that, it's fine. Take the risk of I might have overpaid or made a mistake in paying and losing money, but if it's not a real problem, don't fix for it. Otherwise, really, if they close the deal, you pay. There's a discussion of what happens if it's a multi-year deals. Again, if you are concerned of people churning beforehand, then you can delay your payment, or you can pay less payment, or you can do all these kind of things. But if you don't have that problem, just pay it up. You want your guys to go out there and get you the next one. Um, yeah.
So I guess in closing, and this might be like a longer philosophical discussion that we want to talk about here, but I think that there's a radical idea of maybe even eliminating sales commissions altogether in favor of higher base salaries. This is something that Atai at Cloudinary kind of ran past me when I was first met him. I think like there's some really interesting reasoning for doing this. One, like you probably have like happier employees who are able to kind of manage their own personal finances a little bit better. You probably have sellers who aren't kind of doing that unholy deal at the end of the month or quarter to get commissions in because they've got a mortgage payment that they need to make. It probably makes for a smoother company culture because hey, I'm not like beating the shit out of everybody because of I've got commission riding on this deal. But I think like there's a lot of downside too, to the point we were making earlier about salespeople being risk takers, and they want to try and go get the to get that big deal, and they want to have that upside that's there that goes away. What do we think about that?
It's a long discussion. I would say a
Yeah,
few things about it. First, it becomes really a problem when you really underpay the base. If you're starving on the base, then you really are in a problematic situation. So you got to think
yeah,
about how do I construct it that way. Second, and again, maybe it's another statement that CFOs won't like me, is that I think because of that structure, you need to think about paying more than what a regular salary should be. Right?
yeah,
If it would be just a fixed salary, it would be something probably about, 60, 70% of what an OT should be looking like for a guy who takes the risk on it. And so probably the comp plans or the OT for a needs to, or for sales in general, needs to go higher because of what they're taking on themselves. Now, there's an interesting discussion about paying for performance or paying for time. And it's actually should go beyond the discussion of just about salespeople. I mean, you can apply the same models for engineering. You can apply the same models for customer success about paying for performance. And it's a kind of a shift that the industry will have to consider whether they're doing it or not. Is it, am I paying just for people's time to come and spend time at work? Am I, paying them for their impact or their performance or that level, which is a good discussion. It's a probably longer discussion about which model is better.
yeah.
Um, Personally, I think I like the model of paying for impact. But the conditions are don't starve them, right? And don't
Yep.
give them goals that are unattainable, right? Because then you're just gaming the system and screwing everybody over. But the fact that you have to be thinking about how do I make an impact, and every day you come into work, it's not guaranteed. You have to do something valuable and not just trade your time. I think creates an interesting dynamics, and you see it about salespeople. You have to come in, and every day it's like you have to make stuff happen. Rainmakers, you got all these kind of names for these kind of things. Um,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
think the
Could you
same could
imagine
apply
the
about
fury?
people.
Could you imagine the fury if you went to your finance team and said, "Oh, we're gonna, cut your salary by 50%, and the other 50% is on commission based on your performance. So get cracking."
Yeah. By the way, I would not call it just performance. I would call it by impact. I think there's
Yeah,
nuances. And the onus will fall on the management team and the leadership to define what the impact is and not create siloed plans that are contradicting. You see it now in revenue teams when you have a CRO, when their comp plan for the new business guys contradict the ones for the growth guys.
yeah,
And so you got to get more and more sophisticated. Going back to how simple should your comp plan be? It should be very sophisticated, but it shouldn't be hard to understand. But when it becomes the onus is on you to think about it. And again, it doesn't. You don't need to have a master's in PhD in math to be able to understand it. But have the components like very simple. Close this one. It's here. You get extra this. It's this. But those items is what you care for.
I love it. I love it. Well, that brings us to the end of another episode of Lunch Money with Scott and Edan. I think if your comp plan drives behavior, that's a great thing. But if your comp plan is driving unintentional behaviors, I would love to hear about that. I think that Edan and I would have be a great talking point for a future episode. Is what is being unintentionally driven today in compensation plans. So with that, Edan, always great to catch up with you. Thanks so much for the time, and we'll see you in the next episode.
And don't forget, comp plans are good because we like money.
We do like money.